It's good to see everybody today. I'm very excited to have quite a few scouts visiting with us today. If you didn't notice them and say hi on your way in, then make sure you do that on your way out. You guys are our honored guests today, and we just are very thankful and grateful for you to be here. My kids are not in Scouts this year, but we had 3 really good years in Scouts, and it's an organization I was in as a kid myself for 4 or 5 years, I can't remember. But when I was in a Cub Scouts, one thing that I've always liked about the organization itself is from the start it was founded with really what you see up here on the screen, the idea of our duty to God as being a component. It's not just a, hey, let's learn some cool hobbies and tricks, hey, let's learn some talents and skills and be prepared, but it's also making someone be a well-rounded individual. Yes, we're worried about physical fitness, and yes, we're worried about our mind, but we're also worried about that part of us that's, not so tangible, the soul, who we really are, our character. And from that start, and so every year, really nationwide, the Scouts do something called Scout Sunday, where I think it's the Sunday before they celebrate the founding of Scouts, they kind of honor God as part of their original mission. And every scout here probably could quote this to you. If you were a scout yourself, maybe you remember it. They call it the Scout Oath and Law, and that is really tiny font. It was not so tiny on my computer, but on my honor, I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, to obey the Scout Law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight. And I think they all could probably chime in their sleep. They learn that from the very first day, and I think every kid learns it within 2 weeks, and they say it every meeting. But we're going to talk specifically about that aspect of duty to God. And I fully recognize that among the Scouts there are differences in practice and faith and things like that. But I hope today to talk about some things that are universal. And I think even if someone didn't have a faith in God would say, yeah, that's a good idea. I think the true wisdom in the Bible is something that is on its every level practical. It is good for us to live this way. But the Scout Law as well, a Scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. And it is funny because I think the kids are pretty good about knowing what these are. They'll always ask them each year, hey, what is it? Why is it important to be helpful? Why is it important to be, kind? Things like that. But I do remember from having, helped out in a few of these, what does it mean to be reverent? And the kids, it's like crickets. Some of them, what does that mean? And maybe it's because we don't really use that word reverent that often. I think maybe the only exception in our popular culture outside of religion would be maybe you go to Arlington Cemetery, you visit Pearl Harbor. We talk about having some reverence for the sacrifices given by soldiers. That's about the only time we really use that word. I guess people do still take off their hats for a prayer and stuff like that, but I think we just don't talk about that word often enough. But once we define it, it's not that unusual of a subject because we do talk about the topic. But what does that word mean? If you have an old version of the Bible, the King James Version or something like that, the Old American Standard, your version might say fear. And back then, fear didn't mean exactly what we're thinking today. Well, like I'm watching a horror movie, I'm scared, I'm terrified. But it really what that word meant in Old English, but modern words more mean feeling or showing deep, solemn respect. You don't, skip and joke in Arlington Cemetery and just dance around and laugh. That's just not what the place is for. There's time-honored traditions. There are remembering serious things that happened before. But healthy respect, and specifically when it comes to duty to God or duty to the authorities, it is the idea of a healthy respect for those that are in authority. And like it or not, everybody answers to somebody in this country. Even the one at the highest level should remember that they are answering to the people, the way that our government is set up. But specifically for kids in the audience, you have your parents that you're honoring. They are in the authority in your life. Doesn't mean they have to be a tyrant and have to be really mean to you and tell you everything you got to do all the time, but they are responsible for you. We actually had an interesting thing whenever we legally adopted our son, Logan. The judge specifically said, "Are you willing to take on the responsibilities?" And I kind of wish every parent was forced by a judge to take on that sort of an oath. Are you really ready to take care of this kid no matter what? And man, I mean, we might have a lot of problems fixed if you were forced by a judge before you became a parent. Take this oath. You're in authority. It's not that they just want to tell you what to do, but they are in charge for your good, right? Kings in our country, we don't have a king, but presidents and governors and mayors and all of that, authority figures, teachers. And if you've been in a elementary school or middle school, you know that sometimes, more often than not, there can be a trouble with reverence towards an authority figure. And it's a difficult issue, and you're trying to teach. What does it mean to respect those in authority? We would all agree society does better when we recognize who's in charge and we treat them with respect. Doesn't mean they're always right. Doesn't mean they make every decision perfect. But at least you have a bit of a reverence for the position. And so today I'd like to kind of go back to that idea of what is our duty to God? What does God want from us? And I think across, this is going to be some universal stuff, and it's one verse that I think kind of sums it up really well. And you could spend your whole life talking about what does God want from me. But I think there's one simple verse in the Old Testament prophet of Micah which really sums it up well. And we're going to read this verse, and I'll note all my verses today will be on the PowerPoint. I'd love for you to turn your Bible if you have it with you and want to look that up with me. But if you don't, it'll be up here. And besides this verse, all of them will be in the easy-to-read version, which is one of my favorite versions of the Bible. But this one comes from the New American Standard. Micah 6:8. He has told you, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? And Micah is not a book we visit very often in the Old Testament, but I really think that what Micah is telling the people who were living kind of some wild lives back then, he wanted them to straighten up, and he said, it's really not that hard, is it? It's really not that complicated. God hasn't asked for something impossible that you can't do. He doesn't ask everybody to go do what Abraham did and leave your home country and just do this complete life shift in that way. But what he does ask on a daily basis, it's not these huge things, it's little things. It's to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly. And I'm convinced that for the Scouts, for every member here, every person in listening on YouTube at home, that's our life would be better, and it would be pleasing to God if we would do those things. To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly. That idea of justice, sometimes I think we do have a confused notion. What does justice mean? I was always a fan growing up of superheroes and that kind of thing. And they talk about justice and the American truth, justice, and the American way. Some superheroes, their idea of justice, and even our idea is, I'm going to get the bad guy what they deserve. But the more I've come to understand the Bible concept of justice, I mean, that is included. You know, someday I believe there will be a judgment day when God will punish, give you what you deserve. If someone gets away with it here, if they get away with a crime, you're not going to get away with it forever. God will take care of that. But justice is more than that. And he doesn't ask each of us to go out and, give you what you deserve. Because if we did that, that's more vengeance. God doesn't ask us to go out and get vengeance on people. But really, this idea of justice has to do more with fairness. What is fair? You think about, great sermons that actually came from another Old Testament prophet. When Martin Luther King talked about he wants justice to roll down like waters. It's the life-giving force that gives a nation success, right? When justice is not restricted, when everybody has access to that. But for most scouts, you're not going to influence a national level. But in your own life, you can make sure justice is a part of that. We have this tendency to think so huge, and then maybe we feel so small. What can I really do? What can one person really do? But in your daily life, for everyone here, you can make sure to do justice. In the scripture reading that David did, just to give a little context, things had gotten kind of bad. They had made some friends with kings that weren't very good people, and a guy with Jehoshaphat was his name. He decides that it's unjust in the land. I need to appoint some new judges. And these judges, I've got to warn them to do what's right. I want you to look at what he says to these judges when he appoints them into their position. He says to the judges, be careful in what you are doing, because you are not judging for people, but for the Lord. He will be with you when you make decisions. You must fear the Lord, protect justice, and do what is right, because the Lord our God is fair. He does not treat some people as if they are more important than others, and he does not accept bribes to change his judgments. And I think even a child can understand that concept, right? This concept of justice, it's you don't make some rules for some people and some rules for others. You don't give special preference to one group and then not to the other. And we know this world is a broken, flawed place, right? But with God himself, it's not that way. People imperfectly do justice. But God, he recognizes that everybody was made in his image. Everybody has equal value in his eyes. Male and female were created in his image in the very beginning. And every person deserves that same shot at fairness. We're going to achieve different things in our life, but I can't apply the law differently to you because you have money and differently over here because this person doesn't have money. I can't do it because of racial distinctions. I've got to realize that being just means the same rules for everybody. And it's not just a man-made concept. I firmly believe that justice is something that is put in by God into our hearts. And I'll give you kind of an example of this. I mean, have you ever heard a 2-year-old say, not fair? It happens in my house a lot. My 2-year-old says, no fair. Maybe he means not exactly what God means by it, but he knows something's not right. Hey, that person got something and I didn't. No fair, right? That's a conscience in you. We all have this feeling some things aren't fair, right? Some things aren't right. But what do we do with that? Now, you could ignore that feeling and just live for yourself and live for your best friends and ignore everybody else. But that's a miserable way to live. And that doesn't make the world around you a better place. For kids, you don't change the rules of the game because you lost or your friend lost, right? That's a simple way you can do justice, right? Okay, this is the rules. I don't like how it ended up, but you know what? Fair is fair. You won, I lost. That's justice, right? You don't change the rules so that, one group, things are better for them than the other. And we don't treat other people like they're more important than others. One thing I'll tell you, be the person who goes to those that are sitting by themselves and give them a chance. Introduce yourself. Make a friend. You might be surprised that person may be a lot cooler than you think. They might have a lot more going for them than you think. And you may have more in common. Maybe they're quiet. Maybe they're shy. Maybe they moved recently. And maybe they're going through some tough stuff at home. And they just need someone to show them some kindness. Instead of only hanging out with your circle, your group, who you think is your buddies, going out of your comfort zone. And by the way, adults, we are probably worse than kids about this. I think as adults, we get in our little clique and our core group of friends, and we don't have room in our heart to open it up to somebody else. But you find that person who's new at work. You find that person who moved to the area recently in the neighborhood. And you go over there, bring them some cookies. If you can't make cookies, buy them. But say, hey, I'm here. If you need anything, I'm your neighbor. And this is part of justice, right? And they may look different than you, and that's okay. They may talk differently than you. They may have a completely different culture. Okay. But you don't just because you like the way they look, that's your friend and not the person over here. Or it doesn't matter, right? Justice means trying to give the same treatment to everybody. Now, you might find some people are going to be better friends than others. You're not going to be everybody's best friend. But you don't apply the rules differently. And I like that last part. He does not accept bribes to change his judgments. We know throughout human history, people in positions of power have been easily influenced. And this comes on every side of every aisle, right? From corporations to governments to judges. You know, we all have our things that we're, interested in, and we can be manipulated. But the goal is to seek to be like God, that justice matters. I'm going to treat you fairly. And if something's not right, by the way, call it out. I'm here to tell you that I wasn't perfect as a kid. Shocker, right? And I wasn't necessarily the bad kid. I've told my class, I teach the high schoolers and middle schoolers here at our church. I've told the kids, I wasn't the kid out there doing a whole lot of bad stuff. But I can remember one case in 7th grade in particular, that this one kid was getting mercilessly bullied for silly things that really made no sense. And I didn't speak up. I didn't say anything. I stood by and I didn't join in. But I just stood by and let it happen. Part of justice means speaking up for those who can't speak up for themselves or don't have a voice or they're too afraid to speak up for themselves. And you just say to somebody, the way you're treating them is not right. You're talking about them behind their back, and that's not right. The gossip stops here. That's not true. Do you know that's true? And even if it is true, is that helpful? Who does that help, spreading what you're spreading? Once again, adults, we're bad at this too. But I still, I've got guilt to this day, and I know God's forgiven me for it, but I remember in 7th grade, I should have stood up. And I believe good things from the young people here, from the scouts here, from our own young people. Make it your mission to make justice part of your life. That Micah 6:8 talks about loving kindness. Making kindness something you're excited about. It's not, mom said I had to include them. My teacher paired me with the annoying kid. It's not, I have to be kind. I guess it's time. They're guilting me into donating to a charity again. If that's your mindset, I do it because I have to, you don't love kindness. But God wants us to love kindness, to love loving people, to do it from the heart. And I'm going to give you a couple of verses that, these are from Jesus, the words of Jesus, and I think some really, really wise words. One of them that really young people have trouble understanding, but it's more blessed to give than to receive, right? This is Paul writing about what Jesus said. I always showed you should work just as I did and help people who are weak. I taught you to remember the words of the Lord Jesus. You'll have a greater blessing when you give than when you receive. In the older translations that I'm more used to, it's more blessed to give than to receive. We just passed by Christmas about a month ago, and I'm sure the kids in the audience that got gifts probably had fun getting gifts. And it's so fun. But I hope someday you get to be a parent and give gifts to your kids, because it's a whole lot more fun. I don't want stuff for Christmas, but I love to give things for Christmas. And once you're able to give back, and it's cool to see it in some of our young people, right? When they don't have a lot of money, but they want to share. Our kids around here, a lot of them get candy from some of the members. Just they like to share with the kids and see that joy in their face. And when I get handed candy, or maybe it's been half eaten, but still, they want to share, right? When I get handed a sticker, the kids are a whole lot more selfless than us, I think, at that real young age. But at some point, they get caught up in the American consumerism that I want. We need to, as parents, model the fact that it's more blessed to give than to receive. And for the young people in the audience, to do something for other people. And how is it more blessed? Number one, yes, God sees it and there's an eternal blessing. But even more than that, I think there's a good feeling we get. We know that I've helped somebody. I've encouraged somebody. I lifted their spirits. I made a friend. Sometimes people will tell you, I was having a really bad day, but you just made my day better. And that's treating others the way you want to be treated, right? That's that golden rule. Another verse, sometimes as kids we feel like we don't have a lot to offer. You don't have a lot of money when you're 7, 8, 9, 10, or whatever. Maybe you feel like you don't have a lot of strength. But something that Jesus said, and he was speaking about young people and our attitude towards not letting them stumble, but he also ends that passage by saying this: whoever helps any of these little ones because they are my followers will definitely get a reward, even if they only give them a cup of cold water. So you bring one of these little kids in the back and lift them up so they can drink at the water fountain. You've just made God smile. You've just done something that is going to make that kid's day. And unless you're a baby, there's always someone younger than you. And they could use your help. And they could use just a friend, someone to be a mentor. And mentoring doesn't mean some official program, but it means stepping up and just being there for somebody, right? So we need to love kindness. And it's essential that we show kindness for others. You can't love God without loving people. Certainly you may enjoy some time away in a mountain retreat or a beach retreat, but you can't stay there forever. Eventually you got to come down from the mountain, you got to love people. And that's what it means to love God. But finally, humility. And unfortunately, it's probably true, but it's been said of some religious people that they think they're better than others. It's sad, right? But that's not how it should be, because the Bible consistently talks about humility. My favorite definition of humility, you guys know this already, but comes from the children's book, Charlotte's Web. Learn a couple of words from there, but low to the ground, right? So literally, Wilbur the pig was lowest to the ground because he was the runt of the pig litter. But instead of thinking yourself as so important, hey, they can't do it without me, are you humble? It doesn't mean you have to just beat yourself up. Oh, I'm not very smart. I'm not very cool. You don't have to insult yourself to just be a humble person, to walk humbly. It's not a one moment you're humble, but really it's your whole manner. You just don't think you're the most important. Your world doesn't revolve around you, but your world revolves around being there for other people. This is something that Jesus later will repeat, but it comes from the Proverbs. He says, don't brag about yourself before the king. Pretend you are someone important. It's much better for the king to invite you to take a more important position than to embarrass you in front of his officials. When Jesus tells a story, he says, you go to a wedding, you don't sit at the most important table, because that'd be pretty embarrassing if the bride and groom come along and tell you, you got to move away. And could you imagine that? You go to the wedding, and there's this reserved table up front for the bride and the groom and the wedding party, and you're like, that table has a good view, and it's right next to the buffet. I'm going to sit at this fancy table right here. How embarrassing if they're like, sorry, that table's reserved for the wedding party. We don't do that, right? We know at a wedding, if you're not the one getting married, you're not the most important. But people were doing that in their culture. And Jesus said, stop going to these feasts and thinking I'm so important. But what an honor when you feel like I'm just a humble servant, I'm just helping people, but you get lifted up by somebody else. A lot of people, they talk about how fast they are as kids. And the only reason they lost that race, well, you got a head start. Or they just talk about, I'm so fast. And if only I would have had a fair treatment, I could have beat you in that race. And I'm so good at basketball, I can make this many shots. And kids are always kind of competitive that way, right? Look out for the kid who's silent about their skills, but they show up. And on the court, or in the band, or in the activity, whatever they're competing in, and they just perform. And then they get the honors that are due to them because others notice. And talk is cheap. Anybody can talk. But for you to actually put in the work behind the scenes and perform. And so kids, don't just talk a good game. Don't just think you're so important that the world would fall apart without you in it, and you're the center of the world. Learn to let others elevate you. And if you do good on a test, that's awesome, excited, celebrate. But you don't need to plaster your grade across the whole school, right? You win a sport, be humble. One of my favorite things is in a football game when someone gets an amazing touchdown and they take a knee and then they point up, right? I love that. When an athlete, instead of parading around how cocky and silly they are, look what I've done. It's all me. And honestly, there's some players that might be technically better players than others, but I just don't like them, and I don't like to watch them. I like someone who's humble. Someone who doesn't take personal credit. They say, it's a great coach and a great team this year, and it's a team effort. I love hearing that kind of stuff because it reminds me that someone doesn't just put all the glory on themselves. They'll let others do that. And let's let God put the glory on us. We don't do that ourselves. So it's just really practical, right? There's a New Testament verse that says the same thing. The brother of Jesus, named James, wrote this, be humble before the Lord, he will make you great. Your older version might say, humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, he will lift you up. Right? Who of us could really, we strut into God's throne someday in the final judgment, God, I'm here, welcome me on into heaven, look at all the good stuff I did. You wouldn't do that, right? Before God's throne, you're going to be humbled. But you know what's going to happen to the humble people who kind of bow their heads, they come in before the throne of God, God says, lift up your head. You're coming on in. God will make you great. Right? That's what the gospel is for. It lifts up those who are humble. I think that's why the religion appeals to those sometimes that are more in need. Someone who recognizes, I've got some struggles. I'm not perfect. I need God's help. And the humble people are the ones that are welcomed in open arms to God's family. So, hopefully not too radical of a lesson, nothing too complicated, something practical for scouts, but I think all the adults in the audience too. What does the Bible ask of us? What does the Lord ask of us? Do justice. Just be all about fairness, equality, love, and the same rules apply to the same people. To love kindness, good works are a part of us. We can't help but do good works. That's who we are. And we want to live humbly, to humble ourselves in His sight and in the sight of others. Let Him lift you up. And I promise you, your life will be better if that's the way you live your life. And so just kind of one final thought, that reverence for God, yes, it means respecting Him, but it means respecting His people, His creation. If we believe that God made every person in His image, He made them great, He made them wonderful, He declared it's very good in His creation, then I should love people too. And sometimes I'm not very easy to love, sometimes other people aren't very easy to love, but I need to, because I want to be like Him, and I want to make this world a better place, and I want to shine His light, and I want to make God smile. I want to make God happy. If you're here today and you're not a believer and you want to learn more about God, you can see me after and talk to me about that. I'd love to teach you more about God and answer questions. If you are a believer, maybe you've not been living your life right, maybe you want some prayers, you're welcome to come forward and ask for those. We'd be happy to pray with you. Or maybe you know you need to become a Christian, you've not done that yet. We're happy to make that happen today. We don't want you to wait. Don't put off something for the future. We don't know what's coming next. Life is uncertain, and you don't want to wait to do what's right till later. If there's some way that we can help you to make your life right with God, to enter His family, to be a Christian, or even just to get to know about Him, let us know how we can help you as we stand and sing.